Hello friends, if you want to watch super hit movie The Departed in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel friends in today's video. The movie we are going to talk about is called The Departed. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which OT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production, budget box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film, storyline, star cast, actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. So let's start the video. The Departed is a 2006 crime thriller film directed by Martin Scorsese and written by William Monahan. It is both an English-language remake of the 2002 Hong Kong film Infernal Affairs and also loosely based on the real-life Boston Winter Hill Gang. The character Colin Sullivan is based on the corrupt FBI agent John Connolly, while the character Frank Costello is based on Irish-American gangster and crime boss Whitey Bulger. The film stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, and Mark Wahlberg, with Martin Sheen, Ray Winston, Vera Farmiga, Alec Baldwin, Anthony Anderson, and James Badge Dale in supporting roles. The film takes place in Boston and the surrounding metro area, primarily in the South Boston neighborhood. Irish mob boss Frank Costello, Nicholson, plants Colin Sullivan, Damon, as a spy within the Massachusetts State Police. Simultaneously, the police assign undercover state trooper Billy Costigan, DiCaprio, to infiltrate Costello's mob crew. When both sides realize the situation, Sullivan and Costigan each attempt to discover the other's identity before they are found out. The Departed was a critical and commercial success, grossing $291.5 million on a budget of around $90 million and receiving acclaim for its direction, performances, particularly of DiCaprio, Nicholson, and Wahlberg, screenplay, and editing. It won several accolades, including 4 Oscars at the 79th Academy Awards, for Best Picture, Best Director for Scorsese, his only personal Oscar win to date, Best Adapted Screenplay for Monahan, and Best Film Editing for editor Thelma Schoonmaker. The film also received 6 nominations each at the 64th Golden Globe Awards, winning 1, and the 60th British Academy Film Awards, and 2 nominations at the 13th Screen Actors Guild Awards. Plot. In the 1980s, in Boston, Irish mob boss Frank Costello introduces himself to a young Colin Sullivan. Many years later, Sullivan has been groomed as a spy inside the Massachusetts State Police, MSP, and joins the Special Investigation Unit, SIU. Another police academy recruit, Billy Costigan, is selected by Captain Queenan and Sergeant Dignam to go undercover as a criminal and infiltrate Costello's crew. Costigan serves a term in prison for his cover and further commits several crimes, drawing Costello's attention. Sullivan begins dating police psychiatrist Madeline Madden. Costigan manages to get Costello to recruit him into his organization. Over the next year, Costigan becomes increasingly involved. His mental state declines, but Queenan and Dignam convince him to continue. Costigan begins seeing Madden for his court-ordered therapy. The MSP and Costello both realize they have moles in their respective organizations and task Costigan and Sullivan to find them. Meanwhile, Costigan learns that Costello is a protected FBI informant, sharing his discovery with Queenan. He and Madden have an affair. One night, Costigan follows Costello into an adult theater and witnesses him giving Sullivan an envelope containing information on his crew. Costigan is instructed to get a visual ID of Sullivan, but is unsuccessful. When Sullivan realizes he is being followed, he stabs a man, mistaking him for Costigan, and flees. Costigan, fearing Costello will soon discover and kill him for being the mole, calls Queenan to end the undercover operation, but Sullivan has Queenan followed, lying to the other officers that Queenan may be the spy. Sullivan also calls Costello's gang to inform them of the meeting. When Costello's men arrive, Queenan helps Costigan escape before being thrown from the building to his death. This causes a firefight between the police and Costello's men. Angered by Queenan's murder, Dignam attacks Sullivan and is suspended. Timothy Delahunt, one of Costello's henchmen wounded in the gunfight, tells Costigan that he knows he is the mole before succumbing to his wounds. Looking through Queenan's belongings, Sullivan discovers Costello is an FBI informant. A news report reveals that Delahunt was a Boston Police Department undercover officer, but Costello suspects it is a false claim, so he would stop looking for the mole. Deciding to turn on him, Sullivan directs the MSP to tail Costello, and a gunfight erupts, killing most of Costello's crew. Sullivan confronts a wounded Costello, who admits to being an FBI informant. They exchange gunfire, and Sullivan kills him. His assignment finished, Costigan goes to Sullivan to reveal his undercover status, unaware he is another mole. After Sullivan leaves the room, Costigan recognizes the envelope from the theater on his desk. Realizing Sullivan was Costello's mole, Costigan escapes. When Sullivan finds Costigan gone, he realizes Costigan has discovered the truth and deletes Costigan's records from police computers. Costigan visits Madden, who has told Sullivan but not Costigan she's pregnant, knowing that Sullivan may not be the father, and hands her an envelope, instructing her to open it if something happens to him. Madden finds an envelope in the mail from Costigan to Sullivan containing a CD of Costello's recorded conversations with Sullivan. Fearing Costigan has revealed their affair, she listens to it and leaves Sullivan. Costigan arranges to meet Sullivan on the same rooftop where Queenan was killed, then arrests him. Costigan calls Trooper Brown, an acquaintance from the police academy, but Brown pulls a gun on him when he arrives, unsure who to believe. Saying he has evidence tying Sullivan to Costello, Brown lets Costigan take the elevator. Upon reaching the lobby, Costigan is shot dead by Trooper Berrigan, a friend of Sullivan's who is another of Costello's spies. Brown reaches the lobby but is also killed by Berrigan. Sullivan shoots Berrigan dead so that he can frame him as the only mole. At Costigan's funeral, Sullivan notices Madden silently crying. He realizes they were involved, but when he attempts to talk to her about the baby, she ignores him. Later, when Sullivan arrives home, Dignam is waiting for him, and after Sullivan indifferently accepts his fate, Dignam shoots him in the head, killing him before leaving. Cast: Leonardo DiCaprio as Trooper, William Billy Costigan Jr., Matt Damon as Staff Sergeant Colin Sullivan, Jack Nicholson as Francis Frank Costello, Mark Wahlberg as Staff Sergeant Sean Dignam, Martin Sheen as Captain Oliver Charlie Queenan, Ray Winston as Arnold Frenchie French, Vera Farmiga as Dr. Madeline Madden, Alec Baldwin as Captain George Ellerby, Anthony Anderson as Trooper Brown, Kevin Corrigan as Sean Costigan, James Badge Dale as Trooper Berrigan, David O'Hara as Patrick Fitzy Fitzgibbons, Mark Rolston as Timothy Delahunt, Robert Wahlberg as FBI Special Agent Frank Lazio, Amanda Lynch as Scarmy, Kristen Dalton as Gwen, Shay Duffin as Phil Reception. Box office: The Departed grossed $132.4 million in the United States and Canada and $159 million in other territories for a total gross of $291.5 million against a production budget of $90 million. The film grossed $26.9 million in its opening weekend, becoming the fourth Scorsese film to debut at number 1. It is the latest Best Picture winner to debut atop the box office. In the following 3 weeks, the film grossed $19 million, $13.5 million, and $9.8 million, finishing second at the box office each time, before grossing $7.7 million and dropping to fifth in its fifth week. Mixing it up with modern mobsters for the first time since Casino 11 years ago, Martin Scorsese cooks up a juicy and bloody steak of a movie in The Departed. Different from the director's earlier crime dramas in its shared focus on cops rather than on just the Goodfellas, this reworking of a popular Hong Kong picture pulses with energy, tangy dialogue, and crackling performances from a fine cast, combining to give Warner Brothers a winning hand commercially in all markets. After the elaborate exertions of the period pieces Gangs of New York and The Aviator, it's good to see Scorsese back on home turf, at least in a figurative sense, since the setting this time is Boston rather than New York. Not that he's especially scaled down this time out. The complexity of the crises, formidable dramatist personae, hefty running time, and long arc drama make this a big picture. But the film intensely concentrates on conflict and character, thereby sweeping the viewer up in a tale of epic deceit in which nearly everyone is compromised and comes to no good. From a plot point of view, The Departed closely follows its 2002 progenitor, Infernal Affairs, a big Asian hit and crime buff fave which, like its follow-up prequel and sequel, remained little seen in North America. Scorsese and screenwriter William Monahan, Kingdom of Heaven, who has stated he made a point of not watching the original film and worked only from a translation of the Chinese script, make the material their own by anchoring the story deeply in the Irish South Boston mob, in the milieu's particular culture and societal attitudes. For those who want reassurance, Scorsese is re-embracing the Goodfellas aesthetic. It's there right at the outset. With the Rolling Stones' "Gimme Shelter" setting the mood, an imposing man addresses a nice Irish kid at a working-class soda fountain and presses money into the kid's hand, enticing the boy into his circle. Some years later, the older man comes into focus as crime kingpin Frank Costello, Jack Nicholson, while the kid has grown into a rising star of the Massachusetts State Police Force, Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, long since placed on this path as a mole by Costello. The police, repped by Captain Queenan, Martin Sheen, and his right arm, Sergeant Dignam, Mark Wahlberg, long frustrated by their failure to nail Costello, carefully pick a candidate to infiltrate Costello's inner circle. Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, is a ballsy cadet who has had no advantages in life. They stick him in jail for a time to give him credentials that may pass Costello's muster. Thus are two shrewd, steely young men, unbeknownst to one another, placed within the same milieu with the same contacts but at dueling purposes. It's a wonderful setup for a pressurized, high-wire drama with ample psychological overtones, one that's been impressively constructed like a trap and pays off with appropriate bitter tragedy. Along the way, there is plenty of room for tantalizing confrontations, consideration of human beings' capacity for courage and corruption, and stylistic doodling. Of all the ingredients in the pot, the one that jumps out and grabs you is the language. Man, can Monahan write dialogue, and not just Goomba threats and vulgarities, although he's great with those. Wahlberg, playing his boss's bad cop other half, delivers outrageously insulting tirades faster than Rodney Dangerfield could spit out self-deprecation, and has half of the script's best lines. Most of the rest belong to Nicholson, whose old devil likes to crudely ruminate on sexual matters. He upbraids two priests and a nun in a restaurant for their would-be perversions, and is also capable of succinct philosophizing. When told by an associate that his mother is on the way out, Costello replies, "We all are. Act accordingly." But the heart of the film belongs in the conflicted, ambiguous middle between the outright criminal and the occasional righteous, uncorrupted cop. Sullivan, who is the picture of the savvy, red-blooded, sometimes less than principled Irish big city cop, is able to shine at his job while still managing to tip his patron off to any threat. He puts engagingly brash moves on a shrink, Madeline, Vera Farmiga, who treats traumatized cops as well as criminals, and they soon become a couple. But if, through lifelong preparation, Sullivan has largely learned to cope with his double life, for Costigan, it's a daily struggle. He passes Costello's brutal "Are you a cop?" tests with remarkable strength and never cracks under the watchful eye of the boss's untiringly suspicious enforcer, Mr. French, Ray Winstone. Costigan also enters Madeline's life, putting her at the intersection of an eventual showdown one imagines would send her to a shrink as well. The propulsive movement and sweat-inducing situations inevitably recall Goodfellas, but the sensation here is somewhat different. The earlier film felt like it was on speed itself. The Departed has the exaggerated Grand Guignol quality to it, in the way it combines rock and roll and opera on the soundtrack and in its accommodation of the play acting at its core. The heightened style may also be a way of making room for Nicholson's performance, which is theatrical in a very entertaining way. At times he's right on the money, conveying as convincingly as anyone could the attitudes of a tough old bastard who's had things his own way all his life, while at other moments he flies off into an uncharted orbit for which the director tries to make room. Operating a bit closer to terra firma, DiCaprio is outstanding as the audience's main point of emotional contact, a man gravely at risk every moment of his life. One minor issue is an uncertainty over how much time the main action encompasses. In his third collaboration with Scorsese, DiCaprio has rarely been this vital, energized, or passionate. Damon delivers impressively as well. Thesp's receding boyish qualities merge well with the role, just as a hint of his Jason Bourne hardness adds the necessary ruthless edge to the repellently interesting character. Supporting cast is sparkling down the line, led by Wahlberg, who steals every base on the field and takes them home. Boston boys Damon and Wahlberg set the bar with their accents, while some of the interlopers, notably Nicholson, are in and out. Craft contributions are superb. Michael Ballhaus's widescreen lensing has a wonderful clarity to it, and an unforced sense of composition, while Thelma Schoonmaker's editing nimbly juggles the numerous characters and potentially confusing events without fuss. Christy Zaya's production design, particularly the open look for the police HQ and the modernism she brings out of Old Boston, plays a major role in shaping the film's character. Review: The Departed Martin Scorsese has got his groove back, or most of it, with what is arguably his best picture since Goodfellas, a big, brash, splatteringly violent mob opera starring Jack Nicholson giving it the full Pavarotti, with an outrageous and outrageously enjoyable performance that doesn't so much go over the top as go over the ionosphere. The Departed is a tale of Boston Irish tough guys on both sides of the law. Matt Damon gives the best performance of his career as the creepy and conceited young wise guy Colin Sullivan, who becomes the protege of South Boston's biggest gangster, aging sociopath Frank Costello, played by Nicholson. Costello secretly sponsors Colin through Police Academy to become his personal executive class snitch on the inside. Meanwhile, Leonardo DiCaprio is William Costigan, a moody kid with a brace of uncles known to the authorities, who is now genuinely trying to make it over to the right side of the tracks with a career in the police. He is headhunted by senior intelligence officers, fatherly Martin Sheen and his attack dog Lieutenant Mark Wahlberg, who offer him a new opportunity: use his family connections and credibility to go into deep cover in Costello's gang. It's a remake of the 2002 Hong Kong thriller Infernal Affairs, with Tony Leung and Andy Lau, and where that movie emphasized a cool and elegant symmetry between the doppelganger Finks, with the storyline indirect, and the violence kept relatively low, Scorsese's movie dots the I's, crosses the T's, stomps the skulls, and puts Rolling Stones numbers on the soundtrack. William Monahan's firecracker script cleverly channels the skirling of bagpipes that we heard in the original, from the band of the colonially influenced Hong Kong police. Now, those bagpipes are anything but colonial. They are the sound of Catholic Celtic Boston in full cry, pure angry brawn, tribally committed, territorially obsessed, the music of people who get their retaliation in first. The Chinese motif surfaces, perhaps in homage to the source material, with a plot MacGuffin about Costello selling stolen military computer hardware to some Beijing hardmen and showing no great respect for his customers' culture when they appear not to have the money. Damon and DiCaprio are nicely contrasted. Where Sullivan is smooth of face and style, Costigan is resentful, hunched and clenched, as if wearing a wire coat hanger under his jacket. He just has to sit there and take it when he is harangued, very wittily, by Mark Wahlberg's magnificently abusive undercover cop Dignam, for no reason other than to subject him to a little forensic ball-busting. Costigan makes the mistake of coming back at him with a quotation from Hawthorne, and Dignam jeers, "Wassa matter? You don't know any Shakespeare?" Frank Costello, wearing his own learning lightly, at one stage taps his head with gravitas and growls, "Hey, heavy lies the crown!" Everyone gets good lines in Monahan's screenplay, but the lion's share, understandably, goes to Nicholson himself, each witticism a diamond in the most dangerous rough imaginable. Having menacingly asked after the ailing mother of one of his courtiers and been told that she is on the way out, Nicholson grins as if receiving good news. "We all are," he declaims, "act accordingly." And he certainly does, growling and snarling like an aggregate of the previous Dark Destroyers in his career, and incidentally, finishing the movie with a half-moon gout of blood on his lower lip, as if reprising his Joker from the Batman movies. What a barnstormer this is from Nicholson, the kind of performance that no one else could possibly do, but which he could probably do in his sleep, and in his more heavy-lidded moments gives the impression of actually doing, without it ever being less than fantastic value for money. At one stage, musing angrily on the presence of a suspected rat in his ranks, Nicholson actually does an impression of a rat. Two big front teeth suddenly pop out over his lower lip, and that great snub nose twitches malevolently. I can't see Pacino or De Niro getting away with it. Whistler once said his exorbitant fees were not for the hour's work at the easel, but for the experience of a lifetime. And that is what we are getting with Nicholson. A great screen actor whose charisma has, through the decades, rolled over like a recurring lottery jackpot. Will the 69-year-old Nicholson get a part like this, with a director like this, ever again? As for Scorsese, it is a return to the fluent, muscle-flexing movie-making with a visible directorial signature. Gangs of New York, though very good, was atypical. This is an unapologetic, unironized crime family drama, which the director puts over like a roundhouse punch. It certainly felt like a work from Scorsese's golden years, and even has a scene in an old-fashioned porn cinema of the sort once patronized by Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver, and which surely ceased to exist long ago. Scorsese has hit his stride again, and he has produced something with as much as gusto as his best films of 20 or 30 years back. It grips and shocks and entertains, all with the help of a first-class writing from Monahan, firing off dialogue of which Mamet would be proud. Scorsese, that American movie giant, has never been asleep exactly, but now he is very much awake. The telling of their stories involves a moral labyrinth in which good and evil wear each other's masks. The story is inspired by Infernal Affairs 2002 by Alan Maka and Andrew Lau, the most successful Hong Kong film of recent years. Indeed, having just reread my 2004 review of that film, I find I could change the names, cut and paste it, and be discussing this film, but that would only involve the surface, the plot, and a few philosophical quasi-profundities. What makes this a Scores film, and not merely a retread, is the director's use of actors, locations, and energy, and its buried theme. I am fond of saying that a movie is not about what it's about. It's about how it's about it. That's always true of a Scorsese film. This one, A Cops and Gangster. Picture set in Boston, rather than, say, New York or Vegas, begins with a soda fountain scene that would be at home in Goodfellas. What is deliberately missing, however, is the initial joy of that film. Instead of a kid who dreamed of growing up to be a mobster, we have two kids who grow up as imposters. One becomes a cop who goes undercover as a gangster, and the other becomes a gangster who goes undercover as a cop. Matt Diona is Colin Sullivan, the kid spotted in that soda fountain by mob. Boss Frank Costello, Jack Nicholson. He enlists in the state police after Costello handpicks him so many years. Before, as a promising spy. Leonardo DiCaprio is Billy Costigan, an ace police cadet who is sent undercover by Captain Keenan Martin Sheen to infiltrate Costello's gang. Both men succeed with their fraudulent identities. Colin rises in the force and Billy rises in the mob. The story's tension, which is considerable, depends on human nature. After several years, both men come to identify with and desire the approval of the men they are deceiving. This may be a variant of the Stockholm Syndrome for that matter. We see it all the time in politicians who consider themselves public servants even though they are thieves. If you are going to be a convincing gangster, you have to be prepared to commit crimes. If a convincing cop, you have to be prepared to bust bad guys, even some. Protect your real employers and you look fishy. The Departed turns the screw one more time because each man is known to only one or a few of the men on the side he's working for. If Billy's employer, Captain Keenan, gets killed, who can testify that Billy is really a cop? Ingenious. Additional layers of this double blind are added by the modern devices of cell phones and computers. When the paths of the two undercover men cross as they must, will they eventually end up on either end of E? The same phone call? When the cops suspect they have an informer in their midst, what if they assign the informer to find himself? The traps and betrayals of the undercover life are dramatized in one of my favorite moments when one of the characters is told, "I gave you the wrong address, but you went to the right one." Although many of the plot devices are similar in Scorsese's film and the Hong Kong original, this is Scorsese's film all the way because of his understanding of the central subject of so much of his work, guilt. It is reasonable to assume that Boston working-class men named Costigan Sullivan, Costello Dam, and Queen, and were brought up as Irish-American Catholics, and that, if they have moved outside the church's laws, they have nevertheless not freed themselves of a sense of guilt. The Muchie. Married Scorsese once told me that he thought he would go to hell for violating the church's rules on marriage and divorce, and I believed him. Now think of the guilt when you are simultaneously one, committing crimes, and two, deceiving the men who depend on you. Both Billy and Colin are doing that, although perhaps only a theologian could name their specific sin. A theologian, or Shakespeare, whose advice from Polonius they do not heed to thine own self be. True, and it must follow as the night. The day thou canst not then be false to any man. Another amateur theologian, Hemingway, said, "It's good if you feel good afterward, and bad if you feel bad afterward." Colin and Billy feel bad all of the time, and so their lives involve a performance that is a lie, and that is the key to the performances of DiCaprio and Damon. It is in the nature of the movies that we believe most characters are acting or speaking for themselves. But in virtually every moment in this movie, except for a few key scenes, they are not. Both actors convey this agonizing inner conflict so that we can sense and feel it, but not see it. They're not waving flags to call attention to their deceptions. In that sense, the most honest and sincere characters in the movie are Queen and Sheen Costello Nicholson and Costello's right-hand man, French Ray Winstone. That superb British actor who invests every line with the authority of God dictating to Moses. Inspired by 2002's acclaimed Hong Kong action film Infernal Affairs, added Deep Parda has been reshaped as an American gangster. Movie by who else? Director Martin Scorsese. It tells the story of two A young Boston cop's working undercover on perpendicular paths brought under the wing of brutal Irish crime boss Frank Costello as a kid. Conan Sullivan has been positioned as an upstanding citizen for the express purpose of sending him to the police academy and landing him as a mole for the mob, quickly rising through the ranks of the Massachusetts State Police Organized Crime Unit. The loyal Sullivan is in the perfect spot to keep Costello one step ahead of the law. Billy Costigan, on the other hand, really wants to serve in law enforcement, in spite of the fact that his extended family is tainted by involvement with Costello's criminal activities. Thus, he's a logical choice to infiltrate Costello's inner circle as informant. In other words, both Sullivan and Costans are working undercover for the other side. Idiris inverted question mark. 1 and 2 Idiris inverted question mark 1 and 2 Idiris inverted question mark 1/2. And neither knows who the other is when Costello and the police become aware they each have rats on the inside. The race is on for Costan and Sullivan to uncover each other before one or the other gets exposed and likely added to the pile of bodies accumulating throughout the story. Further tightening the news, both develop a relationship, with Midland, a police psychologist who is ironically unaware of the duplicitous lives her men are leading. Positive elements in spite of the film's tagline, cops are criminals. When you're facing a loaded gun, what's the difference? A delivered by mob boss. Frank Costello added Departed mostly, avoids the moral relativism embraced by many crime stories. The film remains clear on the point that Costello and his goons are bad guys, were never urged to root for Copra Sullivan unswervingly, loyal to Costello or against mob rat. Costan relentlessly ready to do his duty. Although steeped in objectionable content, too much of it flowing from Costello's unambiguous evil. The film wants viewers to keep rooting for justice, albeit in its most brutal terminal form. Characters willing to risk their lives for good are heralded. Those willing to kill for their own gain are not spiritual elements. South Boston. Locals on both sides of the law share an Irish Catholic heritage, even if few of them practice it. As a kid, Sullivan serves as an altar boy. We hear scripture at more than one funeral, and the camera lingers on a card on a casket that reads, "Heaven holds the faithful departed." Costello's girlfriend talks about going to confession and choir practice. On the other side of the film's deep spiritual divide, and in keeping with his deviant nature, is Costello, who flippantly mocks priests as betters. He comments on his sexual activities with a nun before she took her vows and delivers a crude drawing for illustration. Several times Costello uses the church as a scapegoat for the what's wrong with the world, insisting that if people surrender to its teachings, they will become little more than mindlessness, spineless servants, sexual romantic content, incessant. Tough guy talk from both cops and criminals involves graphic descriptions of sexual activity for insult and shock value. This includes oft-repeated obscene sexual slang for both sexual acts and anatomy. Explicit banter revolves around oral and anal sex, incest, pedophilia, homosexuality, masturbation, and peeing, menstruation, and arousal. Costello and his girlfriend discuss and engage in off-screen sexual activity. Costello also solicits the services of a prostitute. During a clandestine meeting at a porn theater, we see quick flashes of what's going on screen. Costello pulls a dildo out of his pants as a joke. Both Sullivan and Costigan have a sexual relationship with Medellin. Much of their goings-on are either implied or not talked about later, but in one extended scene, Costigan and Medellin are seen stripping down to their underwear and beginning an encounter. Violent contents, Scorsese plus gangsters equals frequent. Brutal violence, often presented casually to emphasize the moral emptiness of the characters. Early in the film, a police instructor describes to a room full of cadets the effects of a hollow point bullet on the human body. As the story progresses, we witness said bloody splatter and blowback as a dozen or so characters take bullets to the head from close range. One man shoots himself, others get shot in the chest, legs, stomach, etc., with bloody results. Brutal beatings are administered with fists, feet, and blunt instruments, resulting in lost teeth, gashes, and more blood. A lingerie-clad woman is briefly seen being choked to death with the wire by her husband. A man is stabbed. Punches are exchanged almost as a manner of greeting. Multiple mangled and gore-covered corpses get screens. Time. Costello is at various times seen covered in blood and waving a severed human hand around. He severely beats. Costigan's already broken wrist with a boot. Another police officer falls to his death from atop a building. He's seen falling and then lying in an expanding pool of blood. Crude or profane language? I've never been to Boston, so I can't personally verify whether fiction follows fact, but guys, in movies from South Boston, probably say the F word more than those from any other region. Here, their shared total of filleted obscenities climbs well into the 200s. It almost seems silly to add that the sword gets worked out about 25 times. Jesus and God's names are abused about 15 times. Jesus is combined with the furred gods with Dan. As for the sexual slang already alluded to, extreme terms, and Katie are both carelessly tossed around for even more color, as it were. Drug, alcohol, content, smoking, and drinking are basically background noise. Here, it's the hard stuff that gets all the attention. Costin develops into addiction to prescription painkillers, Axicant among them. Costello is seen high on cocaine, throwing the stuff around like baby powder, about to engage in sexual activity with a prostitute. He tells her to stick her face in the powder until she's numb. He also participates in buying and selling drugs as part of his mob operations. Other note for the elements, Costello and others use racial appetites freely and hurtfully. Italian, Irish, African American, Puerto Rican, and Chinese ethnicities are particularly called out. Conclusion: in some ways, added deep part today delivers exactly what you would expect. From a Scorsese crime movie, well-crafted storytelling, impressive tough guy, performances from a crackerjack cast, and several track loads of brutal graphic, violence, and harshly obscene language, especially and endlessly the F word. Might be unexpected is that even at nearly 70, Jack Nicholson is both the most profane and the most riveting thing on screen. He's like the Joker gone bad, a deviant, conscience-free mob boss, completely convincing as a magnet for those two young cops who love and despise him, and utterly overwhelming the earnest performances of Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon, largely because of him. Fans of the genre will likely add this to the list of iconic gangster films, a list which already includes Scorsese's own A Good Philosopher. Fans may actually complain of the deep Parda isn't quite tough enough, and that's because Scorsese has taken a little of the edge off the violent tone, but certainly not the violin content to service the clever Shakespearean plot. He even throws in several moments of outright humor. For those looking for meaning in between the spatter shots, there's a singular and blaring darker message. It's hard out there for a rat. Though DiCaprio's cost again remains true to his mission, the evil he performs in the name of good leaves an indelible stain he can't rub out. Whether you're a rat for the good guys or the bad guys, duplicity and betrayal always costs you your soul. Scorsese says, even if you scheme your way to some version of success, you can never really win. Liars die inside and then they just plain die. For those looking to eat popcorn along with their movie, or those possessing even a small amount of moral discernment and decorum, or even fans of the much tamer Hong Kong original, most will feel they've stumbled into a drug dealer's locker room in South Boston, with the stench of blood and gunpowder and brain matter splattered on the wall. All right, we've made it to release day for Scorsese's new epic, Killers of the Flower Moon. To celebrate, I'm reviewing yet another one of his heavy-hitting crime thrillers, The Departed. The Departed is a fast-paced, intense film set in the seedy underbelly of Boston. It's a complex, brilliant best picture Oscar winner that constantly keeps you on your toes. The film follows two central characters, Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio and Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, as well as Frank Costello, Jack Nicholson and Keenan, Martin Sheen. DiCaprio gives an exceptional performance portraying the complicated Costa gun and undercover cop infiltrating the Irish mob. His scenes with mob boss Costello are especially electrifying. The main themes of the film are corruption and loyalty. Most of the film's time is spent with the police department chasing after Costello, with all of their attempts being thwarted by the efforts of a mole. This leads to a cat and mouse chase where the stakes are death or life in prison. Scorsese's direction makes for another classic hit. The film feels grounded and authentic to Boston, and his use of classic music, like Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones, just adds another layer of sophistication to the film. Although complex, the dialogue written by William Monahan is witty, clear, and easy to follow. Many films can get caught up in a complicated story, and it can be a detriment to the film. That isn't an issue here. Do it with many Scorsese films. One of the main themes is morality. The Departed specifically deals with corruption and the blurred lines of good and evil when caught between both sides. The moral dilemmas in the film create tension-filled sequences that flesh out the characters and their motivations. Scorsese is a master at doing this naturally, never forcing character development. This film isn't underrated in the slightest. winning many awards, including Scorsese's only Best Director Academy Award. However, I wanted to highlight it as we very well could be seeing his next multi-award-winning film this week. This film has everything you want and more in a crime film. The Departed is a Martin Scorsese movie, and it confirms that the more time passes by, the more Scorsese gives us great movies. The Departed alone won 4 Oscars and also won another 47 awards. This crime movie narrates the story of 2 police officials who choose to move along opposite paths. Dr. William Costa Gunn, a part excellently interpreted by Leonardo DiCaprio, is working undercover to get evidence to arrest Irish mobster Frank Costello, a role interpreted by Jack Nicholson. On the other hand, the other officer, Colin Sullivan, a part interpreted by Matt Damon, his inside information to Castillo, who is going to win in this fight between the good and the bad. Other actors who took part in this movie were Mark Wahlberg, Martin Sheen, and Alec Baldwin. I was very impressed by how Martin Scorsese managed to get out the best from his A-class team of professional actors. In an interview, Mark Wahlberg admitted that he was a bit intimidated to work with Scorsese, knowing who he is and what he means for the film industry. Interesting to know is that Jack Nicholson initially refused to do this movie, and Mel Gibson, Robert De Niro, and Brad Pitt had to refuse to participate in this movie due to other commitments to other movies. The storyline is simply great, with lots of nail-biting moments and some shocks along the way. The Departed also has got an interesting conclusion. You only understand why Scorsese chose this title once you watch the film right till the end. The Departed is a perfect example of why remakes shouldn't be dismissed out of hand. Director Martin Scorsese and screenwriter William Monahan have taken the B-grade Hong Kong crime flicker Infernal Affair and reimagined it as an American epic tragedy. The original film was gritty and entertaining. The new version is a masterpiece. The best effort Scorsese has brought to the screen since he a good philosopher, ending a decade-long drought of disappointments and near misses. In making of The Departed, Scorsese has retained the essential plot structure of the Infernal Affairs, but has transformed the movie into something truly his own. Characters are better defined in situations, are given an opportunity to breathe. None of this This movie deserves mention alongside Scorsese's most celebrated movies. A Taxi Driver, A Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Ended the Age of Innocence. Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, both start out life on the streets of Boston's Irish American community, which is presided over by gangster Frank Costello, Jack Wool. Enrolls in the police academy with the goal of becoming a state trooper. Sullivan also becomes a cop, but for a different reason. He's Costello's right-hand man and will provide him with valuable inside information. Meanwhile, Captain Queen and Martin Sheen and Sergeant Dan Mark Wahlberg have handpicked Costin for a crucial job: infiltrate Costello's inner circle. It's a role he accepts and succeeds at, although not without difficulty. Thus begins a high-stakes game with Costigan sending back information to the cops about Costello's plans, while Sullivan counters by leaking police intelligence to his boss. Both moles know there are leaks, but neither is aware of the truth about the other's position. On-screen talent pools don't get much deeper than this one with a list. Actors like Martin Sheen, Mark Wahlberg, and Alec Baldwin accepting supporting roles. Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon proved 2 crucial things. They are not interchangeable, and when pushed by someone who can direct actors, they can give riveting performances. DiCaprio has displayed growth in each of his appearances for Scorsese, and this is by far the best work he has done in his career. Jack Nicholson is in top form, providing a diabolical villain who can deliver a monologue with unparalleled verve. His part is showy enough that it will be virtually impossible for him to be ignored at Oscar time. Up-and-coming actress Vera Farmiga and British tough guy. When Stone round out a cast that, if not perfect, is close to it. The consistent levels of intrigue and tension are among The Departed high points. Scores draws viewers in with the captivating monologue delivered by Nicholson at a time in the past. The date is not specified, but it is presumably the early 1980s, which includes the most memorable 2 lines in Monahan's screenplay. I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me. After this quick introduction, the scene shifts to the present. It takes a little while for the ins and outs of the setup to become clear, but once the sides are established and the cat and mouse games begin, The suspense begins to slowly simmer, even knowing what was coming. From having seen The Infernal Affairs, I remained on the edge of my seat. Unlike many remakes, this one feels fresh, not recycled. The two characters to profit most from this re-envisioning are Costello, whose role has been expanded, to provide Nicholson with more screen time. It's understandable. Few actors can add more color to a bad guy than Nicholson, and he relishes every moment in front of the camera. Unlike Hina, Batman, where he chewed the scenery, he avoids going over the top. And this makes Costello as frightening as he is magnetic. As Malene, a woman caught between Costigan and Sullivan, Vera. Farriga also benefits. Until now, the actress has largely flown under the radar despite a significant role in the box office due to The Running Scared. But this should be an opportunity for her to garner some notice. Had Robert De Niro played Keenan as was originally intended, no doubt the captain's role would have been enlarged. However, when De Niro became unavailable due to scheduling conflicts, Martin Sheen was brought in, thematically added Departed, fits well with the directors of R.A. The movie concentrates on family and betrayal and what constitute both. The lead characters are loners, but they are linked to the world of Boston gangsters by blood ties. Each also commits at least one betrayal. But the question becomes, who are they betraying? It's not as easy to answer as one might suspect. In the murky waters of double agents, moles, and rats, loyalty isn't a fill commodity to gauge. Every character ultimately earns his or her fate, except perhaps one. Two technical hallmarks of Scorsese's films are inevitable. Michael Bola's cinematography is intense and moody, even though a significant portion of the movie was shot in New York City. The feel is all Boston. Howard Shaw provides the score. But the most notable aspect of the soundtrack is the near-perfect song selection. For the third time in his career, Scorsese uses the Rolling Stones' Gimme Shelter. See also A Good Philosopher. He also employs a cover of Pink Floyd's Comfortably Numb during a key sequence. Since this is a gangster film, there's plenty of bloodletting and profanity. Although one could argue that of the Deep Partita is tame compared to some of what Scorsese has given us in the past. Nevertheless, seeing a director back at the top of his game with a movie that could be both commercially and critically successful is a source of jubilation. The movies have been in the doldrums lately. Added Departed is a much-needed tonic. It's also one of 2006's best features. When it comes to directors, the most noteworthy and legendary are the ones that utilize iconic trademark elements in each and every one of their films. Michael Ba's films are bursting with explosions. M. Night Shyamalan tops everything off with twists. Tim Burton is a living garden of gothic delights, and Martin Scorsese is really a broken bar, really freaking long-winded, unmasking the silence, the horror behind Split and Silence, Read More That May Come. Off is more and critical than authentic, but no disrespect is meant towards this. Director, everyone has seen one of his films, or talked about them at least once in their lifetime. Scores is always buried by mountains of golden awards for literally any movie he does, usually about gangsters, mafia families, and making it damn near 4 hours long. The Departed is an impressively star-studded story that drags us back to the same murky world of the mob betrayal, proving that every philosophical story and artistic frame needs to be topped off with F-bombs and bullets. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The story deals with young undercover cop Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, trying to infiltrate the Irish-American organized crime family in South Boston, which is run by Frank Costello. Jack Nicholson, another rat by the name of Colin Sullivan, mate Damon, successfully infiltrates the Special Investigation Unit as an inside man for the mob. Both the police and the mob find out there's a mole in each side, and now the inside men are trying to kill the other information before everyone's cover is blown and everyone ends up dead. As I said before, this is a song Scorsese has sung for audiences. Many Man a Broken Bar many times before, with the exception of the unbearably bad Shutter Island. I can't recall a single other film he made that didn't deal with crime bosses, undercover cops, criminals, and mafia figures. That's not to say he does this. Material injustice. Far from it. His masterful handiwork at telling compelling stories and creating shock. Drama is unrivaled by almost any director. I have no taste for this particular genre of films. But even I admit, he knows how to make a story that will keep you invested for that absurdly long-running time. The problem is this, is a lot of the same stuff he's done before. The writing is flawless and the drama is intense, no doubt, but it just feels too much like his other films, right down to the predictable outcome for nearly every character. Eventually, you can only be surprised so many times by the turn of events in crime movies that you start to realize it's the same turn of events just with different people. Many probably don't share my opinion. Many probably think I'm the lone loon who thinks Scorsese is a tad overrated and his movies all seem to look and sound the same to me after a while. I will always commend him on the performances he squeezes out of his actors. Nicholson, Damon, DiCaprio, Martin Sheen, Mark Wahlberg. Everyone is on top of their agamy here. Everyone delivers truly award-winning performances across the board without a single slouch in any actor's commitment. Even if I find myself feeling seat pains from sitting too long watching one of Scorsese's films, I always know he'll get the best out of each and every actor involved. My issue remains, though, this genre plays out the same way every time. Every film, no matter who helms it. Outside of the star power of the names, this really feels like the same old crime flick Scorsese sells. Yes, it's beautifully shot. Yes, the actors are all amazing. And yes, it's a well-made film, but it still feels like it's the same well-made film we've seen and expected to see from this director numerous times. I don't speak of my thoughts in Martin's films because I'm generally outnumbered when it comes to those that share my opinions. Even if the odds are against me, I stand by my claim that I do feel this, and most of his work is vastly overrated. Nevertheless, The Departed is an excellent use of quality casting and writing that's unfortunately landlocked in the same tired old genre and game plan that Scorsese has mapped out for majority of his films. It's a better film than some directors' so-called best efforts, but still not one I can see rewatching over and over again either. I have to say that I've always enjoyed Martin Scorsese films, but I've never thought as highly of them as Hollywood does. The film Kanye Shanti Kiss His Ring all the time. His touches would be something else to kiss. For one stretch of time, he had a basic formula after his Taxi Driver D, and it appeared to be Joe Pesci running around doing violence and spouting F-bombs. The Wolf of Wall Street trade from that mold, but has the most F-bombs of any film, not a documentary about the word hoem. In any case, he surprised me with the dark, elegant violence and ruination of souls with his The Departed, a tour de force for Leonardo DiCaprio and Jack Nicholson, plus a minor tour of force for Matt Damon, and easily one of the 5 best films ever made for the work of its entire supporting cast. It was fitting that Scores won his only Oscar for the Departed and didn't, but was nominated for The Wolf of Wall Street, or since with Killers of the Flower Moon with DiCaprio, or The Irishman with Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci. The Departed is the story of 2 rookie cops. One, Leonardo DiCaprio as William Ailey Costin Jr., is a misfit loner seeking his own way in life, and the other, Matt Damon, as Staff Sergeant Colin Sullivan, in the pocket of a gangster who's going to help his boss by being on in the inside. The rest of the film sets up as the bad guys keep finding out what the good guys are doing, and the good guys with DiCaprio undercover in the mob trying to find out the identity of the rat in the police station, who is Damon, of course. The pot simmers, some comes to a boil quickly in this long film, 2.5 hours, and finally explodes into an orgy of deception and murderous violence. Martin Scorsese, who would win his first Oscar for directing The Departed, manages to work a tight, tense tale with just the right violence and an incredible amount of poison in people's souls. It's unlike his mob movies Casino and Goodfellas, which just wear you down with the swearing and violence. Score says he is easily deserving of an Oscar here, because of the work he got from some of the best talent in the business. It never hurts when you're working with the best. Here's the best of the best in this one. A broken bar, I dies middle dot few. If any actors have 2 films, the quality of Blood Diamond. Click here to read my review and The Departed come out in a career much less the same year. However, DiCaprio scored big with both. In 2006, the Oscar winner and 6-time nominee. Stupidly, not for this one, and 3-time Globe winner and 11-time nominee truly came into his own that year with Blood Diamond, an Oscar nomination, and The Departed. He's equally powerful as the undercover cop, as he was as a South African diamond smuggler. DiCaprio puts every ounce of his being into the role of Billy Costigan. It's as pure of acting as you'll find on screen today, and he pours his soul into every second on screen. DiCaprio has become one of 2 most watchable actors on the planet, along with Brad Pitt, and headlined and got an Oscar nomination and Globe win for playing the over-the-top drug swindler in The Wolf of Wall Street, as well as winning for The Revenant. He was also nominated for both an Oscar and Globe from Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time, a Broken Bar in Hollywood. Click here to read my review in which he co-starred with Pitt, and he was also nominated for a Globe for Killers of the Flower Moon and Don't Look Up. Despite Tobey Maguire ruining the remake of The Great Gatsby, I thought DiCaprio was excellent in that period piece. Frankly, I just don't want to take any more time commenting on his awards. So, let's move. Onto A Broken Bar. I Die's middle A Broken Bar. 3-time Oscar winner Jack Nicholson as gang boss Francis A. Frank Costello, who is the epitome of evil walking the earth. Every bit of his being is wrapped up in being evil, perpetrating evil, or inflicting cruel mental and physical punishment on those who displease him or just catch his attention. Costello is as pure evil as you can find in cinema. Just when you believe you've seen it all from him, he goes another yard. Check out the porn movie theater scene. It's as good a role as you can find of his A, and this is the actor who was Cole Nathan R.J. Jessup R.P. Murphy and J.J. Gets Nicholson has been nominated for 9 other Oscars in his legendary career. In case you needed a refresher, his Oscars are for terms of endearment as good as it gets. In my opinion, his best after The Departed is for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. His nominations range from 1969's Easy Rider to Chinatown in 1974 to Prissy's Honor. Click here for my review in 1985 and A Few Good Men in 1992 with Tom Cruise. I Die Middle Dot, the third part of the Deadly Trio. Here is Oscar winner, not for this one. Mate Damon, who is a turn. Code Cop Staff Sergeant Colin Sullivan. Damon is out of character here as a bad guy who isn't as bad as his boss, but his duplicity and depraved sense of ethics causes incredible damage in many lives. Damon almost underplays this role and doesn't get the credit he deserves. He can be offhand, he can be funny, but he isn't as menacing as Wahlberg, nor is he as to his core evil as Nicholson. I guess that his evil is actually worse than Nicholson because he is such a for the mob. Damon was also outstanding in the poker film Rounders. Click here for my review as well as Dogma. Click here for my review. I also liked him in the franchise of Remade. Ocean's 11 films. Click here for my review of the first one. Damon won as co-writer along with Ben Affleck for Good Will Hunting and was nominated in acting roles for Good Will Hunting, The Martian. Click here for my review and invite us. He was nominated with 4 others for Best Picture for producing Manchester by the Sea. I Dare's middle. 8 all-time Oscar nominee Mark Wahlberg got one of his 2 nominations out of The Departed as he plays Staff Sergeant Shaw Dignam. He's excellent here, but doesn't get the screen time he deserves. It's ironic how much better he could have been with an expanded character, but still got the nomination. He's rough, tough, and stoic when he isn't supremely insulting first. Wahlberg gets to be the perfect touch to the perfect ending of a nearly perfect film. He's even better here than he was in Boogie Nights, and he certainly wants to forget Pain Gain. I know I do, and it's one that regrettably I paid money to see in a theater. Wahlberg's other nomination came as one of 3 people behind The Fighter in 2010. Here's a quick rundown on a few of the best in the supporting cast. Ideas Middle a Golden Globe winner and 7-time nominee. Not for this one. Martin Sheen plays undercover boss Captain Oliver Charles Queen, and he's about the only somewhat compassionate cop here and provides a smooth balance to DiCaprio's emotional swings in Wahlberg's institutionalized violence and attitude. Sheen did a nice supporting turn in Wall Street with Son Charlie, and I thought he was best in Apocalypse Now. He won for TV's The West Wing and was nominated 4 times for The West Wing and 1 each for Kennedy Blind Ambition, and the subject was Roses. Sheen also won a Primetime Emmy and has been nominated 9 times, and the win was for an episode of Murphy Brown Ideas' Middle Dot. Vera Farmiga plays Middle and Madden, who is the love interest of Damon and does a solid job with the female lead. She plays smart and intuitive well, but if you need to identify a weak link, it's farming. She doesn't manage to elevate her character and is basically uneven, somewhat milquetoast in her delivery. I'm not sure how this got by Scorsese. Farmiga was nominated for an Oscar in 2010's Up in the Air. She's also a Primetime Emmy nominee for the TV series Bates Motel. I Die Iris's Middle Dot. Ray Winstone plays Arnold, a Mr. French, and he's Nicholson's top enforcer. He is cold in both his extreme violence and personality and is the perfect choice to play second fiddle to the boss. Winstone knocks this one out of the park with either a look or inflection of his voice. Not all actors can do one of those, and he does both here. Winston has also been in Noah and Indiana Jones and The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Phew, what an amazing lineup of stars, A Broken Bar, and the list can go on and on, just as good as how the story continues to unfold with surprises amid the killing and more killing right up until the final scene. American cinema, at its best, not right up there with The Godfathers. Well, the first 2. Anyway, Scorsese is just as accomplished behind the camera as his stars are for being in front of it. He has his Oscar win in direction for D, but also 14 nominations since the first for Raging Bull with Robert De Niro. I just don't want to take up space reciting this legend CV today. My final analysis is that I continue to be even more impressed than the last time. The Departed is just that. Good, and I'm sure if you're reading this, then you've seen it. If not, get it fast. The Departed was the 15th ranked film at the U.S. box office in 2006 with $132.3 million in ticket sales. According to a box office mojo worldwide, The Departed made $289.8 million on its $90 million budget. According to Wiki, the #1 film of the year was Pirates of the Caribbean. Dead Man's Chest with $423.3 million. Also in 2006 was one of the best films you probably didn't see. Thank you for smoking a 1,003rd with $24.7 million. Click here to read my review. Here are the other films from 2006 that I've reviewed. I Die Middle, none dot. The Departed is the film with the most F-bombs, 237 to win an Oscar. The Wolf of Wall Street had more, but thankfully didn't win an Oscar, and thereby be rewarded as if it was a worthy motion picture. I Die's Middle dot. One of Hollywood's biggest jerks. Alec Baldwin is the one discordant casting decision here. He has also been in A Broken Bar Raw. Who cares? I don't. I Die's Middle dot. The casting mistake. That wasn't the talentless Tyler Perry campaigned to get the role that ultimately went to Anthony Anderson. Good call, filmmakers. Perry would have only brought down the quality of the production, and Anderson is so solid. Here. I Die's Middle dot. Brad Pitt was originally selected to play the character ultimately played by Damon, but he chose another project instead. Despite how much I like Pitt, and now he commands your attention when he's on screen, I'm not sure he could have done as well as Damon. Maybe, but not for sure. I Die Middle directly from IMDb.com. Originally a Jack Nicholson turned down his role in the movie, but after a meeting with the Martin Scorsese, a William Mahana, and Leonardo DiCaprio, he was finally convinced to play the role of Frank Costello. The main reason he joined the production was because he had previously done a few comedies and wanted to play a villain again, and he considered the character of Costello to be the ultimate incarnation of evil. It's strange that Jack Nicholson and Scorsese have never worked together, since they seem like a natural fit. He makes Frank Costello not a godfather, not a rat, not a blowhard, but the smart man who finally encounters a situation no one could fight free of, because he simply lacks all the necessary information. He has a moment and a line in this movie that stands beside Joe Pesci's work at a similar moment in Good. Phyllis. There is another character who is caught in a moral vice and may sense it, although she cannot for a long time. Know it, that is Molen Varmiga, a psychologist who works for the police, and who coincidentally comes to know both Colin and Billy. Her loyalty is not to her employer, but to her client A and. Do what a tangled web that becomes. It is intriguing to wonder what Scorsese says you saw in the Hong Kong movie that inspired him to make the second remake of his career. After Cape Fear, I think he instantly recognized that this story, at a buried level, brought two sides of his art and psyche into equal focus. We know that he too was fascinated by gangsters and making so many films about them, about what he saw and knew growing up in Little Italy, about his insights into their natures. He became, in a way, an informant. I have often thought that many of Scorsese's critics and admirers do not realize how deeply the Catholic Church of Vatican II could burrow into the subconscious, or in how many ways. Scorsese is a Catholic director. This movie is like an examination of conscience when you stay up all night, trying to figure out a way to tell the priest, I know I done wrong, but oh, Father, what else was I going to do? It has been a little under 20 years since The Departed finally won Martin Scorsese Oscars for Best Picture and Best Director. In the aftermath of the film's success, The Departed has accrued something of a reputation as a minor work for Scorsese. It's fun, the thinking goes, yet relatively unimportant, especially compared to his weighty late-period trifecta of Silence, 2016, The Irishman, 2019, and Killers of the Flower Moon, 2023. This sort of thinking is understandable, but misguided. The Departed is a wildly entertaining picture, a favorite of Dorm, rooms and movie guys and casual filmgoers alike. It was a hit in theaters and remains ahead on cable and streaming. The kind of movie you can easily jump into halfway through and watch until the closing credits. It's thrilling, hilarious, and one of the most effortlessly entertaining movies of the 21st century. But being entertaining does not make something minor. In fact, it's part of what makes the film great. As well, The Departed is not actually effortless. It only looks effortless. Every shot, cut, noodle drop, and vulgar rejoinder from Billy Monahan's script lands with such precision that you'd think the film was just pure confection. No nutrition. The film moves with a furious momentum. You almost don't notice that 15 minutes go by before the opening title drops, and the whole 2 hours play is a breeze, especially compared to Scorsese's plotting trifecta, already mentioned. There are 2 simple shots midway through the film that capture the electric momentum of this picture. 2 supporting characters, Mark Wahlberg's staff, Sergeant DM and Alec. Baldwin's Captain Ellerby argue over access to resources during a staff meeting at the police station. The camera trucks and pans in a whoo in one direction while framing Wahlberg's face, and then cuts to do the exact mirrored movement for Baldwin's response. This sort of visual storytelling is proof of the film's precision mirroring shots that bring the themes of duality into the shot construction, constant energy, a laser focus on narrative and character, and moving the story forward while keeping the viewer engaged. That The Departed is a film of substance in terms of character and construction and theme is a bonus, but the substance is masked by the film's immense entertainment value. Like so many great Hollywood films, perhaps the greatest ones, the entertainment factor of The Departed makes the film's substance all but invisible. The liquor goes down smooth. It's useful to briefly compare The Departed to the film it's based on Alan Mark and Felix Chong's Infernal Affairs. Infernal Affairs is also a remarkable film, but it's more somber and fixated on the tragic intertwining fates of cops and criminals than its remake. Both films share basic plot, but while Infernal Affairs leans more into the weight of its classical storytelling, The Departed feels more like pure entertainment. But make no mistake, The Departed is a weighty picture as well. Its brilliant character piece and interrogation of identity that seems even more perceptive in retrospect, although perhaps accidental. The film interrogates the way that people in the modern world are constantly constructing identities and negotiating the way they present themselves to the various subcultures that dominate their environments. In 2024, creating an identity whole cloth via the internet is the norm. In 2006, such an interrogation of identity creation seemed more novel, less timely, but the added years have allowed us to see how the film's cat and mouse game between a cop pretending to be a crook, Leonardo DiCaprio robbed of an Oscar at the time, and a crook pretending to be a cop made Damon as weaselly as he's ever been, is not just crime movie fun. It almost becomes a horror movie about how the roles we play end up consuming us, the identities we try to create erasing the very people we are. The Departed perceptively explores the weight of expectations, the limitations of class, and the ways that some people are able to flit seamlessly between one social class to another, while others are incapable of ever truly fitting in. Think of the early scene, where Martin Sheen's kindly Captain Quinlan informs DiCaprio's Billy Costin that he will never be a cop because of who his family is. Billy's dejection and quiet acceptance of Quinlan's words are all you need to know that what he said is true. Billy can never outrun his upbringing. Speaking of DiCaprio, he's excellent in the role. At the time, DiCaprio was still in the reinvention period of his career, where he transitioned from hard thar to serious actor capable of tough guy roles. His work with Scorsese, especially in this film and Gangs of New York, was a naked bid to gain more respect in the industry, and benefits with a certain subset of viewers. At the time, I recall being surprised that DiCaprio could play such a convincing badass. In retrospect, I realize he's only half convincing, which is a feature, not a bug. DiCaprio's Billy Costigan is trying so hard to be something he's not at all times. In the film, he's like a child who desperately wants approval from a father that won't give him the time of day. His 2 father figures here, Sheen, Quinlan, and Jack. Nicholson's deranged crime boss, Frank Costello, do give him some of what he needs, but hardly in ways that truly fulfill him. He wants to be the good cop to one, the good foot soldier for the other, but both are ultimately using him to forward their ends and play out the game against their counterpart. Thus, DiCaprio is an open wound here and shockingly vulnerable. His quieter moments with Verriga's psychiatrist turned love interest middle and register, particularly strongly. In one scene, Billy talks about being in the room with the psychopath and the mental fortitude needed to ensure that one's hand doesn't shake despite the fear gripping you inside. DiCaprio's hand is steady in the scene, but his voice is not, it wavers, shaking in place of his hand, betraying the fear and discomfort that overwhelms him. He's excellent, heartbreaking, which makes his tragic hand all the more painful. Damon is also at his best as the scumbag shy Colin Sullivan who has been playing the choir boy all his life at the behest of all Uncle Frank Costello. We literally see him as a choir boy in the childhood scenes to start the film. Damon is typically cast as a heroic leading man, but he might be best when he's playing characters who are hiding pathologies behind the facade of heroism. His best performance might be Tom Ripley in The Talented Mr. Ripley 1999, and even his cameo appearance in Christopher Nolan's Interstellar 2014 draws on his talent for hiding male relevance within conventionally heroic attributes. Damon might not have as many quiet, vulnerable moments as DiCaprio, but in many ways he's the prime mover of the film as his insatiable appetite for more power and more prestige. Just think of the massive apartment he moves into, which the realtor guarantees will make him upper class in a week, forces him to play everyone against everyone. His self-righteous indignation in moments is truly disgusting. But Damon is also charismatic and funny here, so we never grow tired of watching Colin make one bad decision after another, screwing over one more ally after another. Of course, the cruel irony of The Departed is that neither men are able to survive. Such an arduous process of play acting as their environment ultimately cannot accommodate their constantly changing identities. Only two key characters are left standing in the end. Vermigas, bereft Melon, who realizes the man she was going to marry was responsible for the death of the one she loved, and Mark Wahlberg's Deegan refuses to compromise his ethics or identity. It's fitting. Then that Colin's downfall comes at the hand of Deegan, who returns to clean house and provide the retribution that the larger system is incapable of delivering due to its systemic dysfunctions. The film's ending is remarkably cynical and perceptive about the larger failures of the system and this particular cultural environment at large, but the ending does not play like a season finale of The Wire. It's not somber, but rather runs with a cheeky visual gag as a rat runs along Colin's apartment trailing while his corpse bleeds out in the foreground. Again, the EA entertainment serves as a Trojan horse for the larger thematic lesson. Like the central characters, it presents as one thing, reveals another, and plays with our expectations constantly. The film's quiet intelligence is further proof that The Departed is not just great entertainment, but a great work of art. Martin Scorsese has got his groove back, or most of it, with what is arguably his best picture since Good Fellas, a big, brash, splatteringly violent mob opera starring Jack Nicholson giving it the full Pavarotti with an outrageous and outrageously enjoyable performance that doesn't so much go over the top as go over the ionosphere. The Departed is a tale of Boston Irish tough guys on both sides of the law. Matt Damon gives the best performance of his career as the creepy and conceited young wise guy, Colin Sullivan, who becomes the protege of South Boston's biggest gangster aging sociopath, Frank Costello, played by Nicholson. Costello secretly sponsors Colin through Police Academy to become his personal executive class snitch on the inside. Meanwhile, Leonardo DiCaprio is William Costigan, a moody kid with a brace of uncles known to the authorities who is now genuinely trying to make it over to the right side of the tracks with a career in the police. He is headhunted by senior intelligence officers, fatherly Martin Sheen and his attack dog Lieutenant Mark Wahlberg, who offer him a new opportunity, use his family connections and credibility to go into deep cover in Costello's gang. It's a remake of the 2002 Hong Kong thriller Infernal Affairs with Tony Liu and Andy Lau, and where that movie emphasized a cool and elegant symmetry between the doppelganger with the storyline indirect and the violence kept relatively low, Scorsese's movie dots. The Is crosses the TS stomps the skulls and puts Rolling Stones numbers on the soundtrack. William Monahan's firecracker script cleverly channels the surling of bagpipes that we heard in the original from the band of the colonially influenced Hong Kong Police. Now those bagpipes are anything but colonial. They are the sound of Catholic Celtic Boston in full cry, pure angry brawn tribally committed, territorially obsessed. The music of people who get their retaliation in first. The Chinese motif surfaces, perhaps in homage to the source material with a plot MacGuffin about Costello selling stolen military computer hardware to some Beijing hardmen and showing no great respect for his customers' culture when they appear not to have the money. Damon and DiCaprio are nicely contrasted, where Sullivan is smoother face and style cost is resentful, hunched and clenched as if wearing a wire coat hanger under his jacket. He just has to sit there and take it when he is harangued very witty by Mark Wahlberg's magnificently abusive undercover copnum for no reason other than to subject him to a little forensic ball-busting cost. Again, makes the Mistake of coming back at him with a quotation from Hawthorne and Dignam. You don't know any Shakespeare. Frank Costello, wearing his own learning lightly at one stage, taps his head with gravitas and growls. Hey, heavy lies the ground. Everyone gets good lines in. Monahan's screenplay, but the lion's share understandably goes to Nicholson. Himself, each wittism a diamond in the most dangerous rough imaginable. Having menacingly asked after the ailing mother of one of his quarters and being told that she is on the way out, Nicholson grins as if receiving good news. We all are. He declaims, act accordingly. And he certainly dies, growling and snarling. Like an aggregate of the previous Dark Destroyers in his career, and incidentally finishing the movie with a half-moon goat of blood on his lower lip as if reprising his Joker from the Batman movies. What a barn-tormer this is. From Nicholson. The kind of performance that no one else could possibly do, but which he could probably do in his sleep, and in his more heavy-lidded moments gives the impression of actually doing without it ever being less than fantastic value for money. At one stage, musing angrily on the presence of a suspected rat in his ranks, Nicholson actually does an impression of a rat. Two big front teeth suddenly pop out over his lower lip, and that great snubbins twitches malevolently. I can't. See Pacino or Dyro getting away with it. Whistler once said his exorbitant fees were not for the hour's work at the easel, but for the experience of a lifetime. And that is what we are getting with Nicholson, a great screen. Actor whose charisma has through the decades rolled over like a recurring lottery jackpot. Will the 69-year-old Nicholson get a part like this with a director like this ever again? As for Scorsese, it is a return to the fluent muscle-flexing movie-making with a visible directorial signature. Gangs of New York, though very good, was atypical. This is an unapologetic, ironized crime family drama which the director puts over like a roundhouse. Punch. It certainly felt like a work from Scorsese's golden years, and even has a scene in an old-fashioned porn. Cinema of the sort once patronized by Travis Bickle and Taxi Driver and would surely cease to exist long ago. Scorsese has hit his stride again, and he has produced something with as much as gusto as his best films of 20 or 30 years back. It grips and shocks and entertains, all with the help of a first-class writing from Monahan, firing off dialogue of which Mammoth would be proud. Scorsese, that American movie giant, has never been asleep. Exactly. But now he is very much awake. I'd like to be straightforward here. I love crime. Dramas, but determining what makes a good one can be quite challenging. Are the criminals engaging and entertaining? Does the film explore philosophical themes prompting us to question our beliefs about the world? Or does the film successfully execute the perfect heist? A good crime drama should not only captivate us with its characters, but also delve into profound questions, all while keeping us on the edge of our seats. So, when I first watched Martin Scorsese's The Departed, I had no idea what to expect. I was genuinely clueless about the film's plot, and my expectations were suspended in a peculiar state of uncertainty. However, after viewing the film twice at the time of writing this article, I believe I have found my answer. Did the film deserve all the praise it received? Is the film even good? These questions loom large in my mind as I embarked on my cinematic journey with The Departed. The Departed essentially unfolds the tale of two undercover informants. One of them is Colin Sullivan, portrayed by Matt Damon, who joins the Special Lee Investigations Unit to spy on them for his mentor, boss Frank Costello, played by the late Jack Nicholson. Simultaneously, the SU sends its own informant, portrayed by Leonardo DiCaprio, to infiltrate Costello's crew in South Boston. This intricate weave of deception and loyalty forces the two informants into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, compelling them to uncover each other's true identities. Part of the film's premise delves into the stress, anxiety, and pressure of being an informant. Leonardo DiCaprio delivers an exceptional performance, going above and beyond to portray the character's unraveling mental state as he immerses himself further into his undercover role. One scene in particular, where he walks in the airport hallway talking on the phone, stands out as a powerful example of DiCaprio's acting prowess. In this moment, his portrayal of intense emotions, his yelling, and visible panic vividly capture the immense pressure he is experiencing, showcasing the depth of his character's turmoil. Jack Nicholson's character, Frank Costello, stands out as a remarkable highlight of this movie. Whenever he appears on screen, Nicholson effortlessly steals the show, radiating with sadistic charm. It's evident that he relishes every moment playing the ruthless gangster. One particularly memorable scene occurs during a lunch between Nicholson and DiCaprio at his place. In this moment, Nicholson delivers a captivating monologue about John Lennon and the nature of creating art. This monologue, in my opinion, ranks among the best in movie history. Additionally, the chilling detail of the severed hand in the plastic bag adds an extra layer of disturbing intensity, effectively setting the scene apart and enhancing the movie's overall impact on the film's audience. Martin Scorsese is renowned for delving into the human side of criminals, as seen in prime examples like Goodfellas. These characters, despite their extreme violence, often exhibit a softer, more nuanced side. Scorsese's unique approach involves exploring the depths of his characters, encouraging the audience to comprehend their complexity. However, this film might be an exception. Frank Costello, portrayed by Jack Nicholson, lacks any humane qualities. He is purely sadistic. In contrast to characters like Tommy DeVito in Goodfellas, Costello lacks a discernible softer side. His charm lies in his smooth talk and ruthless demeanor. Surprisingly, this absence of redeeming qualities doesn't diminish the character's impact. Instead, it adds an intriguing layer to the narrative, challenging traditional character expectations and making the film all the more compelling. Another scene worth highlighting occurs when DiCaprio meets with Martin Sheen and Mark Wahlberg under the bridge. Following a physical altercation with Wahlberg's character, DiCaprio occupies the back seat with Sheen's character. At this moment, he questions why they haven't arrested Frank Costello yet. Considering he's been undercover for a year and has provided substantial evidence, Sheen's character patiently explains that building a case takes time. Police require probable cause, a warrant, and sufficient evidence for a strong conviction. This single line of dialogue sheds light on a poignant truth about the criminal justice system. Law enforcement can't simply arrest anyone at will. It emphasizes the complexities and challenges involved in ensuring justice, making the audience contemplate the intricacies of the legal process. This situation can be incredibly frustrating for the individuals who find themselves powerless in such circumstances. It's a feeling of helplessness as you sit there convinced that putting someone away shouldn't be so complex. You might think they have evidence, they have witnesses, a why. Can't they just act? The reality, though, is that the intricacies of our legal system often prevent swift action, leaving many feeling disillusioned and questioning the effectiveness of the justice process. One aspect that truly captivates me about this movie is its cinematography. In line with much of Scorsese's body of work, The Departed exhibits an intricate and visually stunning style of cinematography. There's a particular shot where the camera moves to the right, revealing people behind bars in prison. A simple yet powerful example of the film's great visual composition. Moreover, the fight scene featuring DiCaprio and the Italian guys in the small store is remarkably well shot or edited, emphasizing the intensity of the moment. Additionally, the training montage at the movie's beginning, set in the police academy, is a visual treat. The editing and sound design further enhance the film's impact. The Machine Maker, Scorsese's primary editor, deserves commendation for her fantastic work in seamlessly cutting the film and integrating all the elements to create a cohesive and compelling narrative. While these elements I've mentioned are exceptional, it's worth noting that they echo the high quality found in many of Scorsese's other films, showcasing the consistent brilliance of his filmmaking techniques. This brings us back to the question I posed earlier. Is The Departed overrated? The answer, at least for now, is uncertain. As of writing this review, I am a recent high school graduate embarking on a gap year before starting film school. Like most cinema enthusiasts, I recognize Scorsese's significant contributions to the art of cinema. However, despite this awareness, I haven't watched many of Scorsese's films. Consequently, I find myself in a unique position where I can't definitively label The Departed as one of his greatest works or otherwise. As of this moment, though, it undeniably holds a position in my top 3 scores. Films. Its intricate storytelling, compelling characters, and intense cinematography have left a profound impression. However, the future may alter my perspective. The Departed might find itself lower in my rankings. Until that happens, I remain unable to determine if the film is overrated or if its reputation is genuinely warranted. Another aspect I'd like to address is my minor concern with the film, which pertains to Matt Damon's performance. It's not awful by any stretch, but when compared to the dynamic energy and charisma displayed by Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack Nicholson, and Mark Wahlberg, Damon's portrayal falls a bit short. While not a subpar performance, it lacks the same depth and intensity seen in his previous roles. In essence, Damon's acting, while decent, doesn't quite match the level of brilliance showcased by his fellow cast members in this particular film. I also noticed that the romantic relationships between Damon's character and Vera Farmiga sometimes feels forced. Some argue that her character wasn't necessary and could have been omitted, but I disagree. I believe her role in the film is crucial because it serves as an outlet for DiCaprio's anxiety and drug addiction. As I mentioned earlier, DiCaprio's character is enduring immense stress while trying to infiltrate Costello's crew, and the toll it takes on his psyche is vividly portrayed in the scenes involving Farmiga's character, especially in her office. In my opinion, Vera Farmiga's character does have a place in the film. However, I think the romantic relationships between her and Matt Damon's character wasn't essential. Their connection feels somewhat extraneous, adding a layer of complexity. That doesn't necessarily contribute significantly to the overall narrative. Other than the points I've mentioned, there isn't much else I need to address about the film. The Departed stands out as a brilliant piece of cinema with remarkably few flaws. Considering its overall excellence, I would rate it 9.0. 0 stars out of 10. It's undeniably a great movie, possibly overrated, yet undoubtedly a masterpiece. Boston gangster Frank Costello puts his gun to the back of a woman's head, pulls the trigger in the nonchalant manner with which he'd light a cigarette, and as she stumbles over her husband's already murdered corpse, casually reports she felt funny, obscene, and dangerously insane. Costello is the driving force powering The Departed. Martin Scorsese's return to his urban roots after a decade of period pieces. Then he is played by Jack Nicholson. This marks the first teaming of America's premier cinematic dynamos, working from a script by William Monahan, Kingdom of Heaven, which transfers to Boston's underworld, the plot of hit Hong Kong thriller Infernal Affairs. Scorsese has crafted a story that uses the same premise but feels like an entirely different beast. New or beefed-up characters. Notably, the significantly enhanced role of Nicholson's Costello compared to Eric St. Sam will leave even fans of the original guessing exactly how events will unfold. The setup certainly draws out the best in a cast led by Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon that's probably unused to working in someone else's shadow. Then, this is Jack Nicholson. DiCaprio is Billy Costigan, the cop working his way inside Costello's gang. Damon is Colin Sullivan, the criminal's pro, a Tilda Copyright Guild, the Copyright, groomed from a young age to become a police mole leaking information from inside the force in balancing his leading men against each other says he isn't aiming for his usual criminal anthropology, painting around a picture of Boston's criminal world akin to Goodfellas. New York, his focus is on trust and betrayal, how a man can keep his own identity when forced to live a life that is not his own. And DiCaprio and Damon counterbalance each other perfectly, managing as Tony Liu and Andy Lau did in the original to offer a compelling case study of two sides of the same coin, enemies defined by the same dilemma. Police Detective Sullivan at first appears supremely comfortable in the role he plays, as he climbs up the hierarchy of Boston's police and assembles what outwardly resembles a normal life face. Sullivan manages to position himself so that he's part of the task force put together to, of all things, catch Costello. The flip side is Costin, a recently graduated cop whose family has loose ties to the mob, which makes him the perfect informant to plant inside Costello's gang alone, and allowing such bad blood doesn't run in his veins. Caustic accepts a mission that will finally bring out a violent heritage he can't stem. Comfortable with Scorsese after Gangs of New York and The Aviator, DiCaprio gets the toughest role and delivers. His Billy Costigan is vitalized by a sense of panic and desperation that makes him more likable than Damon, who is burdened with the more hypocritical part. Sullivan can't hide from himself the fact that he's a bad apple who lives on opportunities, not merits. Yet for all the youthful talent, and we also get Mark Wahlberg to bolster the film's young-leaning credentials, The Departed belongs to Nicholson and Frank Costello, a man of unpredictable nature who doesn't simply like violence. He is so steeped in it that it's as natural as breathing. It's hard to say which of his words came from Monahan's script and which were added by the actor who, in familiar fashion, gives the character as much lure charm as genuine danger using fear, be it physical, verbal, or sexual, as a tool to get precisely what he wants. In the course of a single phone conversation with Sullivan, he turns Damon's character from alpha male to subservient puppy in a matter of moments. Then he is Jack Nicholson. And when Ajak threatens to go over the top and sometimes the Actors too much for even himself to handle a score steps in to wrap the back of his hand and keep the narrative firmly rooted in reality when it comes to the dynamics of filmmaking. Scorsese still has few peers. An elevator shootout in the third act could easily be this year's densest scene. The Departed is a sort of time machine. It recalls the richness and moral ambiguity of Hollywood's 70s, presenting stories about real people absent of turn-of-the-millennium concerns. They curse, have sex, lie, fight and sometimes die. Horribly. This is a superbly crafted movie that holds its own alongside, say, Serpico and the French Connection with their immoral characters and intense realistic action. Yet, despite its many layers, the director clearly has no ambition to break new ground. The surprising moments of humor that leaven. The story suggests that he's having fun with the film that puts him back on the mean streets, but with no intention of, detailing the cogs of the criminal world. It's not Goodfellas or Casino, but frankly, it doesn't have to be. He's got Jack Nicholson. I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me, Jack. Nicholson intones at the beginning of The Departed. No one gives it to you. You have to take it. In theory, he's talking about the rise of the Irish in America generally, and Boston in particular in practice. He's talking about himself, offering up a my way-like tribute to his own success. And whether or not anyone intended to give it to him, Nicholson does indeed take you The Departed, a remake of the sleek Superby. 2002 Hong Kong police thriller Infernal Affairs. The movie has been Nicholsonized across the board, becoming fatter, coarser, and more self-indulgent than the original. The credit is not Jack's exclusively, but is shared by Martin Scorsese, who, for his troubles, is a favorite to take home his first Best Director award at the Oscars this coming weekend. If he does, in fact, win, it'll be a tad ridiculous because not only is The Departed are not among the best of Scorsese's films, it's not even the best version of Fathi's film. Infernal Affairs, which I reviewed here, and The Departed are both tell a tale of the twin pretenders, an undercover policeman who has infiltrated the mob. Tony Leung and the former Leonardo DiCaprio in the latter, and a mobster working as a mole within the police department, Andy Lau and Matt Damon, respectively. Each of them answers to an apparent boss and a secret one, and these bosses are the same two men, though with roles reversed, a likable police chief, Anthony Wong, Martin Sheen, and a villainous kingpin, Eric Sang Nicholson. The symmetry of the plot is contrived but cunning, and both films have the good sense to play it straight without a lot of windy philosophizing about the neatly balanced deceptions or the nature of identity where the films will diverge is made clear in the opening minutes. Infernal Affairs introduces its protagonists with a brisk montage that conveys how each can establish himself undercover. A Departed follows a similar but twistier path, pausing to offer such delicacy, seizes a scene in which Nicholson lyrically asks a teenage girl whether she's gotten her period, and then inaudibly whispers something that is presumably worse. Some banter about a vicious but comic execution, an explanation of the massive tissue damage caused by hollow point slugs in a police fire department rugby match that serves primarily as an excuse for the opponents to call one another homos. Now, I'm not averse to sex or brutality in cinema, and I have a considerable soft spot for well-deployed profanity, but it is rather disappointing that even The Departed is nearly an hour longer than Infernal Affairs. Violence and vulgarity form the bulk of what Scorsese and screenwriter William Monahan have added. According to the Internet Movie Database, the word and its derivatives are spoken 237 times in the movie, or about once every 38 seconds for 2 hours. The early suggestion that this will be a story about the rise and fall of the Irish mob in Boston, a Celtic Goodfellas, is an unfulfilled promise. There are a couple of references to rivalries with the Italian Bob in Providence, and the revelation that Nicholson's criminal overlord is also an FBI informant, shades of Y.T. Bulgar. But neither theme is explored. Indeed, the film setting seems largely an excuse to give DiCaprio that bane of narrative economy, a backstory raised by a working-classy dad and a relatively upskilled mom accustomed to living in two worlds. Yada, yada, yada. Scorsese's other additions are similarly questionable. In addition to Sheen's fatherly police captain, he's added two more top cops, Alec Baldwin and Mark Wahlberg, apparently to increase the opportunity for intra-depth departmental fisticuffs and name-calling. I will grant this. Wahlberg has an act for obscene invective perhaps unequaled in film today. Certainly no one else has ever written so many to an Oscar nomination. Scorsese's most dubious departure from and Infernal Affairs is to compress two girlfriends, one for each protagonist, into one shared between the two moles, a police psychiatrist, Vera Farmiga, who lives with Damon but sleeps with her patient DiCaprio. Farmiga is a promising newcomer in a film full of A-listers. But her character is frankly ridiculous. Her precoital admission to DiCaprio, I have to say, "Your vulnerability is really freaking me out right now," is surely the worst line in the movie. Moreover, having the crisscrossing imposters. Both bed, the same woman is one symmetry too many in a movie already groaning under the weight of coincidence, ideos middle dot. It's true that Scorsese's added material does give you the deep art at a certain messy heft and richness of texture relative to the leaner, cleaner Infernal Affairs, but it also tends to crowd out the quieter, meditative elements in particular. While Scorsese faithfully recreates almost every scene in the original, he omits perhaps its most touching moment when Lou, the undercover cop, runs into an old girlfriend and her daughter on the street and were subtly given to understand both that she left him because she believed him to be a real criminal and that the daughter is in fact his. It's a scene that better captures what his job has cost him than all the agonized, brow-furrowing pill popping and fighting with superiors in which DiCaprio indulges to convey the same idea. But the most problematic change from original to remake is the casting of Nicholson, whose outsized persona infects the entire movie. Song's Ma Bocina Infernal A.A. was just that, an inflated hood, a bully who'd risen to the top of his profession. But that's far too pedestrian a challenge for Nicholson, whose career has for many years now alternated between paying homage to his own legend as a charming, but dangerous satyr. Something's got to give, a anger management, a wolf, and astonishing critics by playing its exact opposite about Schmidt at a pledge A as A, good as it gets. Ina the Departed. He follows the former course, imagining his Irish mobster as a Joker scene's clown. Face, a kingpin of Eastwick. The ancient tropes are all there. The grinning megalomania, the adolescent witticisms, the sexual bravado, and of course the marionette eyebrow he uses to tell us he's in on the joke, and thus can't possibly be the joke. He's wrong. Nicholson's overweening self-image flattens everything in its path. In his last film, the atrocious romantic comedy, Something's Got to Give, his ladies' man character treated us to his bare ass and simulated conolingus on an ice cream's cone. In this one, he shows up to a clandestine meeting with a large dildo and feigns masturbation. Why? Because he's Jack Silly. He even persuaded Scorsese to film an explicit sex scene, featuring him with two prostitutes. Though, merciful God, only a few seconds made the final cut. Even those in which he pours fistfuls of cocaine on an unseen playmate seem to have been included for his benefit rather than ours. The shot is so fleeting it barely tracks at all. Never you worry, though. While we may be spared the sight of Nicholson's nakedness, his cinematic alter ego still inflicts upon us the knowledge that it's always been so easy for me to get that I've never understood jacking off in a theater. Thanks for sharing, Jack. I'm sure that there is something in this world more distasteful than listening to a 70-year man boast about all the hot young tail he's getting. I'm just not sure what it might be, which is a pity, because Nicholson's sexual theatrics aside at the deep part is a highly entertaining movie, just not a great one if it doesn't have much to add to Infernal Affairs. That is in part because the Infernal Affair said didn't need much added. I suspect this is a typical instance where people will generally prefer whichever of the two films they saw first, and if Score's direction draws a little deeply from his work, and A Good Philosopher and A Casino Gimme Shelter, which he used on both previous soundtracks, is used at Twice a Hair. Well, those were awfully good movies, but a high-quality knockoff is still a knockoff whether one prefers a Infernal Affair set or The Departed. The latter stands on the former's shoulders. Indeed, the only reason the remake could be made a scan 4 years after the original was that Infernal A.A. made the fundamental mistake common among foreign films of being in a foreign language. So, box office success for The Departed. Yes, by all means, especially in a year as lean as the last, but an Oscar for picture or director, please. Martin Scorsese is not so in need of charity. What he and screenwriter Monahan do seem to be in need of is a little more graciousness toward their Hong Kong predecessors. Back when The Deep Parted was in the early stages of production, a magazine asked me to write a short article about remakes set in Boston. The piece could never quite panned out in part because, during the course of my reporting, Monahan, through an agent, explained that neither he nor Marty consider it of The Departed to be a remake. It's an absurd assertion. The film is not only a remake, but an unusually loyal one that apart from the noted alterations, follows the original twist for twist. This effort to distort it from its source material appears to have continued in the film's closing credits. We first get an outsized directed by Martin Scorsese, followed by an equally huge screenplay by William Monahan. Then the stars and producers are credited, followed by a second reminder that this was a Martin Scorsese picture. Then we see a full cast list, the unit production manager, second assistant director, entire stunt crew, etc. Only those willing to sit through 3 full minutes will finally be informed in modest type that the movie they've just watched was based on. The motion picture Infernal Affairs, directed by Andrew Lau Alan Mak. Screenplay by Alan Mak, Felix Chung. It's as if the creators of F.A. Departed were trying to conceal from the audience that their film was, in fact, a remake. And considering how little they had to add to the original, one can hardly blame them. Strong Christian worldview, with some positive references to Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and Christian funeral ceremonies, but from a liberal Roman Catholic perspective that has a negative view of the Catholic Church's priestly hierarchy and is marred by antinomian pagan attitudes in a dark world where sin abounds, but with a clear but sometimes conflicted moral center where the police are indeed the good guys, especially the undercover cop hero and was Captain. Though the police are imperfect, and one good cop working with the undercover policeman has to resort to questionable methods in order to get one of the 2 main bad guys with an apparent moral equivalency at times between the police and criminals, especially in the use of similar means to achieve different ends. At least 297, mostly strong obscenities, including many words, 10 strong profanities, and 3 light profanities, including some crude sexual comments. Extreme graphic violence with a fair amount of blood includes fighting during which people are thrown against objects. Man breaks his hand, hitting a man who was threatening a store owner. Point-blank shootings, some against a few people. Heads with blood spattering behind them. Gangster brutally bangs man's cast against table and breaks man's hand. Again, gangster comes out of his back office with blood covering his arms and his rolled-up sleeves. Man shoots himself rather than be captured by police. Man thrown off roof of building. And a few corpses with pools of blood implied fornication in one scene. Unmarried couple lives together. Man kisses woman's stomach while she's wearing only her bra and panties. Some crude sexual remarks, and couple shown lying in bed 1 or 2 times after a night of implied fornication. Upper male nudity and partial rear female nudity during foreplay. Excessive full male nudity in one scene where man shows realistic-looking rubber penis to another man as a joke. Naturalistic upper male nudity and woman in bra and somewhat skimpy panties in one scene. Alcohol. You smoking. Gangster deals. Drugs and gangster shows. Woman a bowl of cocaine and tells her to make yourself numb before their plant intercourse. Scene cuts away after that joke and strong miscellaneous immorality such as stealing, moving stolen goods, extortion, and gangster behavior mostly. Rebuked. Spying on the police. Rebuked police sergeant crudely and insultingly. Interrogates a new recruit. Small politically correct attack on the patriot attacked in one piece of ironic dialogue. And a good cop commits an act of vigilantry justice which is not really rebuked. Martin Scorsese is the world's most overrated director, but he undeniably has lots of filmmaking talent. That talent shines brilliantly in his new police thriller, The Departed, an American remake of an award-winning Hong Kong thriller titled Infernal Affairs. Despite some story problems and a longer than necessary running time, the movie works wonderfully if you can stomach the constant foul language. Ironically, the original Chinese movie had only 7 mostly light obscenities. Guess how many scores movie has? The Departed stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon as 2 new Irish recruits for the Massachusetts State Police. DiCaprio plays Billy. Costigan and Damon plays Colin Sullivan. Billy is immediately shifted into the force's undercover ranks to spy on violent gangster Frank Costello, played by Jack Nicholson, from Billy's old Irish neighborhood in South Boston. Except for his father, Billy's family is known for being petty criminals. So Billy is able to fit right in with Costello's mob, only Billy's 2 superiors in the undercover unit, Captain Queen, Martin Sheen, and Sergeant Dignam, played by Mark Wahlberg, know Billy's true identity. They have given Billy a criminal past to ease Costello's suspicions. Billy is supposed to be a street-smart, tough guy from a criminal family whose violent temper cost him his badge and landed him in prison. Back on the streets, Billy ingratiates himself into Costello's gang, but not before Costello tortures his broken hand a little to make sure he's not working for the cops. Colin, also from South Boston, actually works As a spy for Costello in the state police's elite Special Investigations Unit, or SEU, Colin secretly helps Costello stay one step ahead of the SEU by leaking information to him. Eventually, Colin and Costello figure out that there's a spy in their gang, and Billy and the state police figure out that there's a Costello spy in the CO. Only Captain Queen and Sergeant Dam stand in the way of Colin finding out that Billy is the spy in Costello's gang. There ensues a complicated cat-and-mouse game which leaves everyone's nerves on edge. Some clever plot twists spice up the action. The plot in The Departed is even more complicated than the plot in the original Chinese movie. The thick Boston accents are also a bit hard to follow, especially at first. But despite the almost constant foul language, the directing and acting are brilliant, as is the dramatic conflict and conflicting personalities between the well-developed characters. Another problem with the story, however, is that since the plot is so complicated, there seem to be some significant plot holes. For example, both Billy and Colin come from South Boston and have special knowledge about Costello's criminal activities. So, it's hard to believe that they never really ran into one another while growing up. The movie tries to cover up this plot hole by having Costello being the only one who contacts Colin, and by having Captain Queen, and Sergeant Dam being the only ones who contact Billy. This doesn't quite work, however, because both Billy and Colin come from South Boston. Of course, South Boston is a big place, but it stretches credulity to believe that because they both know Costello and both trained at the police academy at relatively the same time, Billy wouldn't suspect Colin, and Colin wouldn't suspect Billy. Be that as it may, the direction, editing, cinematography, acting, and characterizations are so strong that the movie sweeps the viewer past these script problems and plot problems. All the actors do a great job, but Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Wahlberg as Billy and Sergeant DM are particularly outstanding. Naturally, Jack Nicholson has the flashiest role, though he gives one of his best performances. We've seen this kind of role from him before. Even so, he's still fun to watch. Also, just because an actor does a role that's similar to others he has done before does not mean that the particular role in question shouldn't be judged on its own merits. John Wayne, for instance, played similar kinds of heroic roles in his career, but the amount of complex variation he accomplishes within many of those roles is a joy to behold. Thus, overall, everything works well in The Departed until that is the end, when the movie begins to wear out its welcome, with multiple endings. Most people probably won't notice these multiple endings because they all involve action and violence. Consequently, they may not be as noticeable or irritating to most people as the multiple endings in, for instance, The Return of the King were to some. Scorsese says he probably will get a pass from critics on this problem because they unjustly rate him too highly. But the problem of multiple endings is a genuine flaw. Although The Departed seems to side with the three good cops, Billy and his two earnest superiors, the movie's story takes place in a dark, violent world. In that fallen world, people can't be trusted, and the police must sometimes do questionable things in order to put away the bad guys. And make no mistake about it, Frank Costello is a very bad guy, as is his main henchman, a man nicknamed Mr. French, played ruthlessly by Ray Winston. At one important point, one of the three good cops must resort to a morally questionable act of vigilante justice. This act makes one of the movie's main moral points. However, that ultimately you can only get away with murder and mayhem for a certain length of time. Eventually, justice will be served, and the wicked and the faithless will get what they deserve. Scores and his screenwriter William Monahan insert some positive references to Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary and some Christian funeral scenes to complement this moral theme. Thus, The Departed has a strong Christian worldview from a Roman Catholic perspective. In fact, the title of the movie refers to a Roman Catholic saying, where the dead are referred to as the faithful departed. These Christian themes in The Departed are profound and subtle. They may be worth further exploration. Despite these positive qualities, however, the Christian worldview in The Departed is a liberal one. For example, the movie makes a small attack on the patriotic act in one piece of ironic dialogue. There are also a couple minor jabs at the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, including one or two references to the homosexual sodomy that some Catholic priests and archbishops committed and/or tried to hide from the public. Furthermore, the movie also sometimes creates a kind of moral equivalency between the police and Costello's gang. For example, the tagline for the movie is "Cops are criminals." When you're facing a loaded gun? What's the difference? Finally, although the story occurs in a dark, fallen world of flawed people, which is a Christian-Jewish belief that comes directly from the Bible. The movie suggests that God is somewhat removed from the battle between good and evil. Hence, the movie's Christian worldview is almost as flawed as some of the movie's characters. The Departed is a problematic movie, mostly because of the nearly constant, very excessive foul language, as well as some of the movie's graphic violence, the gratuitous and unbalanced plots at the Catholic Church, and the gritty, almost hopeless world in which the story takes place. There is also one scene where Colin and Costello are supposed to meet secretly in a theater showing dirty movies as a joke. Costello scares Colin with a realistic-looking rubber penis, eliminating this gratuitous joke, cutting or diminishing the movie's foul language, and making the movie's ending more hopeful would make The Departed more morally and spiritual acceptable. It also would have made it an even more entertaining and more sublime work of art if Mr. Scorsese would return to his Christian biblical roots and learn to follow traditional dramatic expectations more closely. Sometimes his movies would be even better than they are. Way better artistically, theologically, morally, and philosophically. They'd also probably make much more money. Of course, if Score says he did those things, perhaps the jaded, cynical film critics in the politically correct, degenerate secular news media might not praise him so often. We are not supposed to seek the praise and honor of men, however, but the glory and righteousness of God through Jesus Christ. According to statistics from the U.S. Department of Education, educator sexual misconduct by Charles Shakeshaft, 2004, teachers sexually abuse 32,000 American children at school each year. According to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, there have only been 10,667 allegations of sexual abuse of children in the church between 1950 and 2002. Even if you increase that number 10 times to account for unreported cases, that means only 2,050 cases of child sexual abuse occur each year by officials in the Catholic Church, compared to 32,000 cases by Americans, school teachers. Yet the news media and movies such as The Departed, like the trash the Catholic Church far more often than America's school teachers. That doesn't excuse, of course, pedophile priests nor the bishops who hide such transgressions, but it does make one think a second time before making jokes or engaging in angry diatribes at the expense of the Roman Catholic Church. The Departed is one of the best films of the year. Martin Scorsese has redeemed himself from recent releases, such as The Aviator and Gangs of New York. While those two films were good pictures, they were not excellent. They did not reach the bar that Scorsese had set with many of his previous pictures, most notably Goodfellas. The Departed takes place in Boston, exploring the Irish mob, underworld, and the Massachusetts State Police. Good guys versus bad guys with the twist. There is good and bad on both sides. Jack Nicholson plays Frank Costello, a witty evil mobster that audiences will love to hate. Frank is the ultimate evolutionist. He embodies survival of the fittest and would sell his own mother if he could make a buck out of it. Matt Diona delivers one of his best performances as Colin. Sullivan is worse than a dirty cop. He is a planted mole who is only loyal to himself. Leonardo DiCaprio deserves an Oscar, a registered nomination for his role as Billy Costin, while detractors may bark that he is not pushing any new ground playing an undercover cop. I would quickly point out that this is the best performance ever by an actor playing an undercover cop. DiCaprio becomes Costigan. His accent and facial expressions are gritty and real. The audience instantly understands how he feels from moment to moment. Only a Best Actor lost to Forrest Whitaker for The Last King of Scotland can be allowed come next March when the Academy Awards are handed out. There are many other great performances by Alec Baldwin, a Martin Sheena, and a very funny Mark Wahlberg. This film is clearly one of the best cinematic experiences audiences have had in a long time. All praise aside, looking at this film through the eyes of a believer, there are lessons to be learned. While there is no nudity, there are some strong sexual scenes, plenty of violence, and enough foul language to make a sailor blush. Parents should not allow children to see this film at all and should see it before they allow their teenagers to view it. The film is a lesson in Nina and its inevitable consequences. OG. Sousa said, "A man will reap what he SWs." The characters on the opposite side of the law are sowing a death, mayhem, and a murder, and it catches up to them. It also caught up the good guys, and unfortunately, that is the result of a sinful world. One thing that stands out is Matt Damon's performance as Colin Sullivan. As much as we may hate him and want him to be caught, we cannot also help but identify with him. and hope he reforms before he gets exposed. The reason is because there is a small part of him in all of us. A bit of a dual role where we play the good guy on the outside and struggle with the bad guy within, while our individual sinful nature have not plunged to the depths of Sullivan's in the eyes of a Christ Ina committed in the heart is just as offensive to a holy God also committed outwardly. It is important that as believers we have the correct view of self in light of what Jesus Christ is. The lesson from Sullivan's character for the believer is not to let sin entangle us to a point where we are trapped by it, but to be open and accountable to others. Transparency is the best way to fight a hypocrisy. Now, obviously, Damon's character takes it to the extreme, but pictures of the extreme always have a way of bringing things close to home. Damon's character tries to play both sides, not the good and the bad, but for the mob and for himself. And in the end, he gains nothing from it. This film reveals a bit of the depravity of a world without the God, a world without the hope. It paints the picture of a world living by the consequences of an evolutionary mindset where every man is out for only himself. Pan out in part because during the course of my reporting, Monahan, through an agent, explained that neither he nor Marty consider it the deep part in it to be a remake. It's an absurd assertion. The film is not only a remake, but an unusually loyal one that, apart from the noted alterations, follows the original. Twist for twist, this effort to distance The Departed from its source material appears to have continued in the film's closing credits. We first get an outsize directed by Martin Scorsese, followed by an equally huge screenplay by William Monahan. Then the stars and producers are credited, followed by a second reminder that this was a Martin Scorsese picture. Then we see a full cast list, the unit production manager, second assistant director, entire stunt crew, etc. Only those willing to sit through 3 full minutes will finally be informed in modest type that the movie they've just watched was based on the motion picture Infernal Affairs, directed by Andrew Lau, Alan Mack. Screenplay by Alan Mack, Felix Chung. It's as if the creators of Foth and Departed were trying to conceal from the audience that their film was, in fact, a remake. And considering how little they had to add to the original, one can hardly blame them. And some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.